All right, well, folks are coming up, and thank you for that. I'll just give a little bit of our intent here. We've got our general topic of ecosystem management, consistent with the theme of the symposium. I think if you looked at the agenda, there's a couple questions that there we go. Oh, good. I can be even louder. I'm usually too loud. Now I can be louder. We got a couple questions that what we're wanting to have is just a discussion, if we can, up here, as opposed to kind of a scripted, going in line and everybody just answering questions. So just for a little context, once again, they're in the agenda, but we've got two questions to kind of drive the discussion here for the next bit of time for the roundtable. And you'd think, printer technology is weird. I printed this out, and it actually split it on front and back, half and half. I don't know. I can't figure that out. So we've got the two questions. Let me just read the questions, just to remind our roundtable folks and you all out there of what we're going to be talking about in general. But hopefully it'll be a dialogue as opposed to a check-the-box discussion here. So the first question is, what changes in ecosystem function is your organization most concerned about? And then the second question is, what is the importance of considering ecosystem management for the mission of the collaborative program and for your organization? Also in the agenda, it has the mission of the collaborative program. Similar to what I kind of mentioned earlier, we've got, we were creating a collaborative space, a collaborative forum in support of science and adaptive management. And we're looking to both benefit and recover our endangered species, but also to preserve and protect our water, both currently and into the future. So that's kind of our mission context for the collaborative program. And just to start off the discussion, and then hopefully folks we can go free form. If not, I'll name names and call people out, but that's no fun. Well, it is kind of fun for me, but not fun for the person I call out. So the question that kind of spoke to me the most...
Let me turn him down a little bit.
The question that spoke to me the most initially is the second one. What is the importance of considering ecosystem management for your organization? I'll cut that out, the collaborative program to start with for our organization. So to get it rolling, from the first thing that came to mind is, once again, a little bit of our journey with Bureau of Reclamation. And I'm going to give a kind of a case study. Bureau of Reclamation has a river maintenance authorized function where Congress, not only for water management, but they authorized us to manage the Rio Grande geomorphically for effective water and sediment transport and to protect riverside facilities. And so that program has really evolved over time as well, where we started off, particularly as we got into more of an environmental component of our river management, river maintenance. We call it river maintenance. That's kind of clinical. River management's probably a better term. We started to look at very localized, site-specific conditions and trying to do both geomorphic adjustments to the river and looked at species and habitat adjustments. But initially, and for quite a bit of time, the focus there was more on local conditions where there were perceived problems, right, where there was a threat to a riverside facility or sediment plugs and whatnot. As times progressed with our river maintenance program, we recognized that if you do that at just a really local, specific scale, you're just going to be treading water. It's kind of the Band-Aid analogy, right? That you're not really turning the corner for long-term solutions, but you're just holding your own. And so with our river maintenance program, what we've really made an intentional shift is to try to look at larger scale ecosystem. In that context, we don't term it ecosystem, but it is. It's larger scale river restoration, river management, and to that end, we've got some programs down south where we're doing. We've done multiple miles of river realignment, trying to when you step away from the very site-specific focus, you can then start to look more clearly at some of the natural functions of the river and try to work within that so that you can actually hopefully have longer term benefits. And so we've been doing some river realignment projects, larger scale, 6 miles, where we're planning one now for over 20 miles of a river realignment, trying to move the river to where it wants to go in the valley, the lower part of the valley, and not keep fighting it and holding it with the levees to where it's no longer really functioning that well. And so that shift to larger scale river management, restoration, river maintenance, I think is kind of a bit symbolic of where we're going with the collaborative program and the science as well. That if you look at the endangered species as species specific, and you're trying to maybe benefit and recover species, for example, you're just going to be treading water. But with the collaborative program, if you can expand that to look at the endangered species within the context of the ecosystem, then you can start to work with nature and the natural functions and hopefully have more, build in more resiliency and have more longer term solutions. So that was just my thought of our journey with reclamation on our river maintenance program as it kind of applies to that second question on the importance of considering ecosystems, as we move forward. So, anybody have any other aha moments as you were thinking about these questions?
Also, if you could please introduce yourself before you speak for the first time so that folks who don't know you get to know you.
Yeah, I've got a mic. Are you holding it out, Paul, because you want to start?
They handed it to me, so I guess I'll start. Can you guys hear me? Yes, there it is. Okay, so I'm Paul Tashian. I'm with Audubon Southwest, and been working on this river for about 3 decades. And I do want to recognize that many of the old guard that are in this room, such as myself, harken back to the days of the Bosque Initiative. This is before the collaborative program really got started. And that program, you can look at the documents. They're online. The Bosque Biological Management Plan it really is an ecosystem management program. And when the collaborative program sort of came online, the Bosque Initiative went offline with the expressed intention that the collaborative program would take up the mantle of a community-based ecosystem approach. So it's in our blood, okay? I just want to say that much. And part of in our culture. So just want to recognize the importance of that program that is the foundation of much of our work today.
All right, well, I'm going to see if this works. Does this work? No.
I turned the switch off. There's a switch popping up.
Oh, yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Tom Turner from the University of New Mexico. I'm an old-timer, too. I've been around since 1998, so maybe not quite far back as some of these folks, but I've been around for some time. One of the things that has really encouraged me about this program is the direction, the science direction that the program has taken over the 20-some years that I've been involved with it. And as a signatory, UNM really doesn't have a regulatory role. It doesn't control any water. It doesn't do anything like that. But I think UNM can make some contributions on the science and also on the policy side in terms of the expertise that's available. But the big question, I guess, for that has been really driving a lot of thinking amongst people I talk to is, how much ecosystem function can we recover with the water we have? And we know the water we have is dwindling. We know that the timing of that water is going to change. And the big question is, what's it take to activate floodplain type habitat? Can we get the same kind of benefit from vegetated islands? Can we get the same kind of benefit from shoulders that are developing, as ecosystem processes, hydrological processes happen in the river? So it's really, for us, I think that's the big question. And it really is a science question on the one hand, so when and where does this water come from? And then the how of this is how do we deliver the water in such a way to maximize those benefits? So, I think, we've, at UNM, we've been involved in this program for a long time, more or less. But there are some exciting developments happening at UNM. We've just hired a couple of really great water people. We have one in biology, Alex Webster, one in earth and planetary sciences, Marissa Repash, and both of them study hydrological and ecosystem type processes. So there's some new blood, some new energy, and we're very excited about seeing how this program works towards the future, with a little bit of trepidation about where things are going in terms of when and where this water is going to come from.
Hi. Hi, I'm Hera Walker, and I am the Corps of Engineers Program Manager for the Collaborative Program. I've been in my position for about 6 months or so, and actually the primary EC rep is the Lieutenant Colonel, the Commander, Hansborough, in the Albuquerque district, and he couldn't make it today, so I'm going to do my best to represent the Corps and the Corps' perspective and mission. So part of my program, since 2009, there's been annual appropriations from Congress to help the Corps support the collaborative program. And what we do is we have, our staff participates in the governance of the collaborative program, and also we support various types of assistance to the collaborative program, like the program portal and long-term data monitoring, such as BEMP. And we also fund a number of studies and assessments and monitoring projects that hopefully feed into adaptive management and help support ecosystem restoration. My program, we don't focus on, or we're not allowed to, we don't have the authority to actually do ecosystem restoration. That's done by other folks in the Albuquerque district, by folks in civil works and ecological resources. And there's various authorities that allow them to do this. It comes mostly through the Water Resources Development Act, where every 2 years or so we are notified of what kind of projects we can undertake. And the type of projects that we generally undertake are those that try to address how the Corps has changed and modified the river. The Corps has been doing a lot of work in the river for about 8 decades or so, and then that work was really to help prevent flooding, and some of it had to do with helping to have efficient water conveyance. But all of that, even though it did its job, it also really affected the ecosystem. And so folks that work in the ecosystem restoration are really trying to figure out how do we address how we have changed the river, how we've affected the floodplain connectivity and the incision of the river and the deposition of sediment on the sides of the river, and how we've affected how the river is able or not able to really overbank and flood into the floodplain, and how that really affects things like maintenance and regeneration of the willow and cottonwood bosque and various riparian species that depend on that bosque and depend on the river. And so we do partner with non-federal sponsors, and we do a number of different restoration projects along the Middle Rio Grande. Most recently, we've been working with Santa Clara Pueblo and Okewinge to begin doing an environmental or ecosystem restoration project in Espanola. But there's a number of other projects that we're involved in. such as there was a project from Sandia down to Isleta. There's been a number of bosque ecosystem restoration projects that maybe Andre will be talking about later. And if you take a walk down by the Nature Center, you walk out to the river, you'll see some of the work that's been done to restore the cottonwood willow bosque, but also to create some of that, to try to connect that floodplain to the river and bring some of that water into the floodplain and promote silvery minnows spawning. So our main focus is really trying to figure out how we can address, like I said, some of the changes that we've done to the river. And we really we're trying to focus on a whole ecosystem management because, we're trying to figure out how we can have the biggest bang for the buck, right? And other people here have talked about this, is we, on one hand, we have to do compliance and work with the Fish and Wildlife Service to make sure that we're not jeopardizing endangered species and that we're helping to recover those endangered species. But we have to kind of have this overarching view of how can we benefit the most amount of species with whatever actions that we do. We have to be risk informed to make sure that what we're doing for, let's say, the silvery minnow is not negatively impacting, let's say, the flycatcher or the cuckoo. And really, how can we get those processes in place? And other people have talked about this too, that we have this altered system, and we may never get back to like what the original natural state is. And we have to deal with what the system we have is now, but we really want to try to figure out how we can improve resilience, improve those relationships between the different species, the connectivity of the floodplain to the river, and figure out how we can do the best we can to improve functioning and form of the ecosystem. So if you want to ask any questions later of me about some of these projects, I'll try to answer them the best I can. But that's generally the perspective of the Corps.
Oh, she's just going to hand it to me.
Well played. That was good. I thought I was going to have to step in.
No,
good
designate somebody.
All right. Who gets it next? I'm Deborah Hill. I'm the Rio Grande Basin Recovery Branch Supervisor for the Fish and Wildlife Service, Ecological Services. So our office handles the threatened and endangered species in the state of New Mexico. And so in particular, our branch has the Rio Grande Basin, which includes the Rio Grande and the Pecos rivers. I actually started in 2007 as the southwestern willow flycatcher yellow-billed cuckoo lead. At the time, cuckoo was not listed, but we were starting to pay attention to it, and have slowly made my way back to the Rio Grande after being gone for a while. But something I've been thinking about, and what Tom mentioned earlier, the fact that we have less and less water to look at into the future. The fact that we have 5 endangered species in the Middle Rio Grande is a symptom of what's going on. We could probably have 100 listed species in the Middle Rio Grande. So it's really just the fact that the ecosystem processes and the habitat is no longer what it was. The river doesn't function, and we don't have the amount of water to have that. The minnow is really the centerpiece because it's so directly connected to the water, right? It's an immediate response. You don't have water, you don't have fish. But then when you start to look out at what we're talking about of ecosystem, the wetlands that you have sedges and rushes that the mouse needs, we don't have those anymore. The thick willow that requires water coming through in big pulses and overbanking, where you have southwestern willow flycatcher, without those regular natural processes, you're not going to have that. And then without long-term, you're not going to have the habitat of the cottonwood overstory that the cuckoo requires. So really, if you think about it, each of those species are just representing a different layer in the ecosystem. And so for me, we've never been at a point that we needed collaboration more than right now, because we're no longer looking into the future, we're in it and trying to figure out what do we do with the limited amount of resources, which water being that major one. I think we're going to have a paradigm shift in how we utilize the water that we have going into the future. So I do think that those hard conversations and really trying to come up with solutions is going to be difficult. I think everyone in this room probably would define ecosystem healthy differently. And so I think we all need to have those hard conversations now.
I'll trade you then. Hi everyone, I'm Kim Eichhorst with Bosque Ecosystem Monitoring Program, or BEMP. I feel like a lot of what I was going to say has been covered, so I kind of want to maybe tack on something a little different. Part of it is the ecosystem function has changed, and that was that base first question. And it's not something that we can really recover, so this collaboration, the investment has to continue because the management will have to continue. Deborah kind of touched on the mosaic that has to come back in the face of increasing variability with climate change. We really need to have the resilience of the patchwork mosaic and not a continuous stand of aging cottonwoods. But that slightly different perspective, I think, that I have just because of my job is not just the importance of the science, but the outreach, the education, and investing the younger folks in this ecosystem, in the science, in the understanding of how we should adapt to support this ecosystem. And I do want to, I was trying to quickly catalog BEMP students that have ended up in our partner agencies. And I know we have former BEMPers in the City of Albuquerque, Interstate Stream Commission, Water Authority, probably forgetting a couple, but it's really great to have kiddos, K-12 students, who then come up and they're like, I did BEMP when I was in elementary school, and they take the class at the University of New Mexico, or even we have students from CNM who experience BEMP outreach directly through CNM, and then they come to UNM, they take the class, they're like, I changed my career path. I'm going to actually go into policy making, or I'm going to go into conservation through Forest Service. And to have that connection is something that is really critical, and it's something that we're hoping to build on. One of our new requirements in our advanced class is that not only are students directly involved in addressing stakeholder questions in research in the Bosque, tacking on to what we already do, but they're going to be required to come to meetings. They're going to be required to make presentations directly to the stakeholders to try to build that investment and really hopefully build that next generation that cares directly into these positions that are actively working to support this really shifting system.
Yeah, with the, I guess the first question, what changes in ecosystem function is your organization interested in? And there's a lot, and we've talked about like floodplain connectivity and some things, but the vegetation management and the mosaic, when reclamation and others, but I'll just speak for reclamation's looking at going back to our river maintenance program, and we're trying to meet multiple benefits of habitat and water delivery and efficiency. For example, and I won't capture it quite right, but we've got a project in Isleta right now where it's kind of a water delivery bottleneck. And so we need to try to improve some water delivery efficiency through this reach, but also balancing, especially with diminished water supplies, some of the other water losses, and veg management comes into play. And so it's, we think that we're looking forward to, and we're hoping groups like this can come up with a vision for vegetation, the riparian vision for the Middle Rio Grande. And so when we hear the terms mosaic and maybe not just a continuous cottonwood, aging cottonwood bosque, there's opportunities there where if we're doing, say, restoration in one spot where it's maybe we're trying to pull some flycatchers north out of the reservoir pool area, we can maybe focus on some cottonwood willow restoration in that context. But if we're doing possibly a project in Isleta where we're really kind of focused on, it's to everybody's benefit to get this water a little bit moving better through this reach, not only for the river downstream, but for deliveries to Elephant Butte and compact compliance, which all kind of ties together with what we're doing. Maybe in that reach, we can look at maybe some of the sedges and a different type of a habitat that might not be as water consumptive to meet the benefits that we're looking in that specific reach, and not maybe do the cottonwood willow plantings, but do a different type of part of the mosaic, and being able to have that vision in the mosaic and kind of tailor the type of vegetation that we're looking to maybe restore or bring back or create to our system needs at that site or at that time and point in time. There's some opportunity there, but it'll take some visioning because we in a lot of ways we're so focused on that cottonwood willow revegetation that I think there's other opportunities out there that can meet more of the conjunctive needs of the river. So I just wanted to make that point.
Well, as long as I've got a hold of a microphone, I might as well start talking now. I'm Matt Wunder, and I'm the chief of the Ecological and Environmental Planning Division at New Mexico Department of Game and Fish. And I've been involved in the program in various guises off and on almost since the inception. But in the last 15 years or so, the department has taken a more active role, even though we don't necessarily have a regulatory authority related to water use. We don't use a great deal of water in the Middle Rio Grande. But we do have a strong interest in riparian systems more broadly. And just by way of history, back around the time that the collaborative program was stood up, the State Wildlife Grants Program was initiated, State and Tribal Wildlife Grants Program. And the department gets about, up to $1 million a year from that program to basically work with wildlife. And one of the requirements of that program is we had to produce a State Wildlife Action Plan. And so back in 2006, the department produced the Wildlife Conservation Strategy for New Mexico. That was updated, has to be updated every 10 years. And so in 2016, that was updated to the State Wildlife Action Plan. And we're in the process of updating that again. But going back to the beginning, it was recognized through the research that riparian areas are extremely important in an arid state like this. And the figure that we sometimes use is that somewhere up to 80% of the species out on the landscape at some point or another in their life cycle are dependent on or use riparian areas. So we recognized early on that riparian areas are very important. That is carried through in the 2016 revision and update, and will be carried forward again. And so beyond the Middle Rio Grande, we are interested in riparian areas across the state. Because one of the goals of the State Wildlife Action, or the State Wildlife Grants Program, is essentially to keep common species common so that they don't have to be listed ultimately because of declining population or status. That's especially important now as we're looking at a future of accelerated climate change, reduced water, greater demands on that water. And so we have worked to try to do what we can to help maintain ecosystem function, which helps protect biodiversity more broadly. And we use that information because one of the functions of my division is to respond to and assess projects that are brought to us. Somebody brings the, whether it's a on-the-ground project in a riparian area or anywhere else across the state or a policy, we try to look at that and see what kinds of impacts that might have on wildlife and habitats. And so we look at that and trying to better assess the impacts to riparian wildlife. We did partner with University of New Mexico Natural Heritage Program to develop a statewide riparian habitat map that Esty is going to talk about a bit later. And so that goes back to, it provides some very granular, detailed information about the habitat mosaics that are, extant on the landscape, and gives you an idea of what potential impacts could occur because of development projects and how you could possibly look forward to riparian restoration or enhancement in a changing climate. So from the department's perspective, riparian areas statewide are extremely important for supporting biodiversity, both within the immediate riparian area and in the greater landscape. And so that's the perspective I bring in terms of the importance of ecosystem function, both statewide and in the Middle Rio Grande, which faces probably significantly more challenges than many of the other riparian areas in the state.
Oh, I think Mark has.
Let me run with this, Mark, real quick. My name is Andrew Hautzinger. I'm the district director at Valencia Soil Water Conservation District, aka the 17th signatory to this collaborative effort. I love the way, Deb, that you captured it. We're in the midst of a paradigm shift. There's no other way to view it. In my humble, you travel the world and you're not going to see a single large forest that's not in a period of transition. Our riparian system is no different, right? So the things that we care about at Valencia Soil, the changes in the ecosystem that really have us most concerned about is the shift from this flood-dominated evolved ecosystem into a wildfire disturbance system, and how the hell we're going to deal with that, and how we're going to keep the species diversity, which has already plummeted. So that's our other big concern, is we've completely lost the variety of woody species, grass species, you name it. The natural history work that we reviewed that UNM did back in the 30s, some of these natural history surveys for master students were just done so well, tell you this story of a rich fabric of diverse broadleaf vegetation that now we replant cottonwood and willow, which I got no problems with cottonwood willow, but can't we do better, right? Can't we re-enter some of those lost vegetative partners that were at the Christmas table but no longer are? So that's kind of our perspective, that lack of diversity. We really view ourselves, we're kind of this small microcosm of in our 280 acres on the Whitfield complex. We're this tiny little piece of the Middle Rio Grande, but we think we can play. We think we can break some eggs to make an omelet. We feel like we have the opportunity to do some experimentation to start reducing the uncertainties of how you connect water management to species survival, right? Which many decades of work have gone, but we still have huge uncertainties in just that question. What does the water management component mean for these 5 species of special interest? So yeah, that's just my perspective. I really think, as we're moving, one of the decision points for my board of supervisors to knock on the collaborative's door to enter was the difference in today's scientific perspective of being more focused on adaptive management and habitat considerations versus when I was a Fish and Wildlife Service employee back in 2010, 2011. I'd sit into some of these collaborative meetings, and it was somewhat soul-sucking is the word that comes to mind. You had species battling species, and it ended up being a cluster when nothing got done. And it seems like in the last 5 years, a lot of really cool things are getting done. So we want to be part of that, jumping on the bandwagon, using our 300 acres as contributory kind of experiment-based land for the partners, the collaborative, to help us make the best use of.
Thanks, Andrew. So I'm Mark Kelly from the Water Authority, and the changes in ecosystem function that the Water Authority is most concerned about is hydrology. Like others, like Thomas said, what are we going to do with the smaller amount of water that we have? The Water Authority is really concerned with, water being in the river because that helps us out. We get to run our water treatment plant when there's a sufficient amount of water in the river. And I think looking forward, what we got to do is, take opportunities when they come to try and help out the species in the new ecosystem that we're living in right now. And Chetan is going to talk, is it today or tomorrow, Chetan? Today, about a project that we got going at our wastewater treatment plant outfall, where we're actually, designing for floods happening at lower volumes. So, previously, a lot of restoration sites are designed around 1,500 CFS to inundate, but we're not seeing that anymore, right? Or we're seeing it once every 5 years. So Chetan did some great research to figure out, if we're going to be looking at our ecosystem function into the future, let's design for a lower inundation volume, flow rate and things like that. And I think we need to all just keep our eyes open and as opportunities come up, take them, but also with the lens of how the ecosystem is different these days.
I want to add a different perspective in that I think that the glass, I always say this, the glass is 30% full. There's a lot of really amazing stuff going on in the Rio Grande in central New Mexico. There is a inset floodplain that is developed in the Isleta Reach, and there's young cottonwood forest that has developed over the last 10 years, probably about 3 different cohorts. The flycatchers are moving into this forest and nesting in there from Elephant Butte area. There's similar bars forming in the Albuquerque area. So I just want to say that, that's my 30% full plug. And in terms of the ecosystem processes, also there's, yes, there's this discussion about not having enough water, but many of the years there's too much water. Last year there was too much water because we didn't have the conveyance or the flood ability to pass it. And then it got stored, and then it was released in November and December at high flows when it shouldn't have been. And it flooded out roost habitat for cranes. So to me, this speaks of my perspective, my organization's perspective would be a primary ecosystem function is very much related to flood control and really the importance of things like I think Jim was talking about, opening up and ensure that we can get the bigger flows. We're about probably limited to about 4,500 CFS now because of the Bosque Farms area. And we need to be up in the 10,000, 12,000 CFS range. And if we can pass that water and manage that spring pulse, I think there is a bright future for this river.
All right, so I think it's a good time now to do some questions and hopefully answers from the audience of the executive committee members up here. If anybody's got any questions about what the different agencies are up to or thoughts on anything that's been said, please speak up.
Hello, hello. No? Okay, it's working. Hi, I'm Olivia McIntosh. I work with Vide Oro National Wildlife Refuge. I'm a biotech over there. I deal more with visitor experiences and education and getting them out into the outdoors and making sure they have that spark of enjoyment to make sure they go on that 7-mile hike or go birding or something like that. But I want to say it's really refreshing to hear you guys talk future-sightedly about what the environment needs to be based on the things we're going through now. I feel like a lot of times I'm in discussions where people are like, more cottonwoods, more willows, we're waiting on that 1,000-year flood or something like that. I'm like, that's not what it is anymore, though. So it's really, really nice to see you guys being progressive and aware of the things that we're going through as a wetland environment. So what I want to ask is what you're saying that cottonwoods and willows are very monoculture, and we just keep putting more, even though the environment is showing that it's not going to be able to sustain those species as it gets older. So what are some examples of different types of plant species or different types of environments that you guys have been cultivating and different types of projects that where those different types of plant species are showing that they can be that middle species that can adapt through the low water environments and then moving into that more fire-torn environment that you had mentioned earlier. So I'd like to hear some of those examples if you have any.
Do you guys have the second?
I'm just,
Okay.
I just want to say that historically, half of the floodplain would have been saltgrass meadows. And even if we don't have the water in, there are areas that are super perched or where the riverbed is really degraded. But grasslands, some of the dryland or upland species, like shifting away from thinking that every stretch along the river has to be riparian, and understanding that it'll still be riparian in that it's next to the river, but it won't be the historic riparian species, but allowing that patchwork mosaic to include some of the dryland species that will do really well in dry years. Nathan?
Yeah, I want to, Nathan with Pueblo of Santa Ana. I want to hit 2 points before we get away from your question. The first one is about cottonwoods and willows. And a lot of times it seems like when we're doing a lot of cottonwood and willow planting that we're mindlessly doing it. And there is some of that going on, but some of it also has to do with public perception. And if you move too fast, I could cut down every cottonwood tomorrow at the Pueblo of Santa Ana, and I would be fired the next day. You know, if I stop putting in cottonwoods in my species list, even if they're incidentals, I won't get funded. You know, like, hey, I'm doing a riparian restoration. I want you to fund me. We're going to put in saltbush. You know, it won't fly for too long. You really, it's one of our big failings is that we don't take into account the blindness of public perception at times. And we think we're doing the right things, and we get up in a public meeting and just get reamed because, you know, we're trying to be progressive. So with that said, Santa Ana is still putting in cotton and willow. I don't ever see that changing. Even in spots I'm like, this is going to die, you know. In terms of the species list, we are shooting for drier species. But even now, with some of those species, we're like, oh yeah, this is going to be a winner. We're going to get a huge whatever of this plant. It's going to take off, and we can't keep it alive. You know, we're really struggling, I think, with what this novel ecosystem looks like. And that's really what we're doing, is creating a new novel ecosystem based on an old novel ecosystem. So with Santa Ana, it's really a shotgun approach. Like, if I put in as many species as possible, and some of them make it and some of them don't, I feel like we've succeeded at that point. 15 years ago, that I never would have said that. I would have said we would shoot for 100% of everything that we put in the ground, and would have been pretty close. These days, I'm not exactly sure what's going to make it and what's, you know, not going to, even based on conditions and the traits that I know of the species. We're still learning, and each year is different. Some years it's like, we put that in last year and it did great, and this year, for some reason, it's not doing great, and it's right next to the one that we just put in last year. So the rules are starting to shift in ways that I think those of us that are managing the ecosystems we don't understand how to make those predictions real well. So if anyone has an idea, let me know. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. I'm Colleen McRoberts. I work with the City of Albuquerque Open Space Division, and we manage about 4,300 acres of the bosque in the Albuquerque area. And I think the perspective that I want to offer up is the complexities, especially in the Albuquerque area, but not that it's not true of other spaces, along the Middle Rio Grande, but of managing this system, because especially for our division, we're looking at recreation, education, and habitat restoration. So we're managing for all of those things, and we're also in the urban core, where we do have politics and perception that plays. We have a citizenry that is absolutely passionate and loves this space for their recreation outings, and that's wonderful. We want them to be out there and doing that. But there is then the education that needs to come along with that, because there are lots of different perceptions, and not to negate any of those perceptions, but they don't always all align, and nor should they. I think that we are also dealing with a lot of the negative side of that urban interface, which are things like encampments, vandalism, off-road vehicles, just general destruction to the habitat, and then fires is probably one of the biggest things that we deal with, that are all pretty much human caused. And so, it's very complicated. We also, for being in the urban core, I would love to see us have a lot more resources, a lot more boots on the ground. I think having, personally, I think if we had like an army of people almost that were really out there, like ranger type people, interfacing with the public all the time, like Central Park. I'm not saying the Bosque is like the Central Park, but I'm saying like, having that kind of resources where we really had just tons of people out there kind of doing more finessing type of work, removing invasives at a much slower pace. We're going through a project right now where we're doing a large field thinning project right in the heart of the city along Central. Many of you probably have seen it and may have questions. I will just say, that was really instigated as a hazardous field mitigation project. We got grant money from FEMA, about $1 million to do that project. And, it really is to address wildfires that are the most abundant in that area because mainly of encampments. It's very complicated. I think that it's important for us that, people who have the boots on the ground, which is our agency amongst others, to really, try to work with everybody else here and thinking about what kind of bosque do we want in the future. Those aren't easy questions to ask because we don't fully understand what the future is going to look like. We've got lots of great ideas. I think, the invasives, we don't want a forest full of invasives. That doesn't help support a lot of the other ecosystem services that we need. But that's where things are often going. And, I really do appreciate these conversations. And I don't think that anybody has the answer. I think, we're trying things. And we have places like Whitfield Conservation Area. We have places like the Candelaria Nature Preserve where we're able to do experiments. But, I think these conversations and understanding the complexities, both the human complexities and the ecological complexities, the different uses of the river, all that comes into play. And it is really great that we're having these conversations because, as what was stated at the beginning of this roundtable discussion, this is, I think, the most critical time to have these conversations. What we're doing here today will have real impacts into the future. And we want to get it right, And there's not, I don't know, we're going to do our best, but it definitely helps to know that we're not doing this alone and that we've got a lot of great scientific minds, great land managers, a lot of agencies, and a lot of funding. Back to one point, though, I just wanted to finish. So talking about that large FEMA grant, it's great to do these large-scale projects, but, and there's been a lot of great large-scale projects led by the Corps and many other entities within the Bosque, which is wonderful to get those resources. But really, I almost think like the better approach is the slower, more thoughtful approach, doing things, but that takes not one-time money. It takes like money that's supporting staff and researchers and scientists to do this work, monitoring, all the time. And that's the money that's really difficult to get, unfortunately. So maybe there can be some thought during the next 2 days about that, how we get there too, because I think that would be a huge solution rather than massive big projects all at once. Anyways.
Amen to that. Yeah, does anybody have one more quick question?
Well, hopefully it'll be quick. Hey, good morning, everybody. My name's Adrian. I'm over at UNM at the Etten Center. This is a really exciting conversation to hear from the collaborative program, so congratulations on getting to this point. My question is, I'd like to get a sense, particularly from the federal agencies, where you guys currently stand on the long proposed National Academy studies of reservoir operations. You guys have talked a lot about river maintenance and about flood operations, but our reservoirs are key to so much. So curious, you know, in particular the Corps and Reclamation, where you guys stand on that right now.
Yeah, my program doesn't particularly deal with dam operation and maintenance, but what I've been told to say is that we really can't make any changes to water operations without congressional approval. So, and some of that has to come from sort of non-federal partners and stakeholders to kind of put that pressure if that's what they want to do. And so what we are capable of doing is somewhat narrow, because we really function our 4 dams here in the Middle Rio Grande, Abiquiu, Cochiti, Galisteo, and the Jemez Canyon Dam. Their main function really is for flood control, right? And so when we start talking about managing dams and managing water, that's getting into the authorities of other agencies, like Reclamation, that deals with the people who actually own the water rights, right? And really can speak to how that water should be released. And we just are really providing a service in some ways. So we kind of have a narrow view of our authorities and what our mission really entail. And yeah, it would take some sort of act of Congress to sort of change how we manage these systems to make sure, or these reservoirs, to make sure that they address some of our ecosystem concerns.
Thank you, Hira.
But that does happen. We had an act of Congress that changed the way the Bill Williams River was run by the. You can't have it.
Well, thank you all so much. Wonderful conversation. We hope to see it continue. So